1:11 in the morning, October 16, 1946. The location is a converted gymnasium inside the Nuremberg prison complex. Just 72 hours earlier, American soldiers played basketball on this floor. Now, the hoops are gone. Under the glare of harsh electric lights, 3 black wooden gallows rise toward the ceiling. The heavy steel door opens. 2 army sergeants march the first condemned man into the room, Joachim von Ribbentrop. He was Hitler's foreign minister. He was the architect of the non-aggression pacts and the man who delivered the declarations of war. Now, his power is gone. His hands are bound behind his back with thick leather straps. His face has no color. It is white as chalk. He climbs the 13 wooden steps to the platform. He stands on the trap door. The executioner secures the noose around his neck. The hood goes on. The lever is pulled. Ribbentrop drops. But the silence does not come. The rope snaps tight, but the fall is not long enough. His neck does not break. A black curtain conceals the space beneath the gallows, but it cannot hide the truth. Witnesses in the room hear the aftermath, gurgling, struggling, the wet sound of a man choking. Ribbentrop is not dying instantly. He is being slowly strangled to death. Why did the calculation fail? It seemed like a standard procedure, but incompetence turned justice into torture. 9 other men wait in their cells. They hear the footsteps. They hear the trapdoors bang open. This is the reality of the Nuremberg executions. 10 of history's worst war criminals are facing their end. But there is a hidden variable in this equation. The executioner is a fraud. Master Sergeant John C. Woods lied about his experience to get the job. He claimed to be an expert hangman. The records show otherwise. He is botching the job in real time. At first glance, a military execution, but in reality, a gruesome amateur production. The details found in the archives are stomach-turning. Woods built the trapdoors too small. As the men fell, they did not just drop clear. They smashed their faces against the wood of the platform. The medical reports confirmed the damage: bloody noses, lacerated faces. Some prisoners lost control of their bladders in the final seconds. Urine stained their trousers before the floor dropped out. The death times were recorded. They were not instant. One man swung at the end of the rope for 28 minutes before his heart stopped. But one prisoner denied Woods the satisfaction: Hermann Göring. He was the designated successor to the Reich. 2 hours before the guards came for him, he crushed a glass vial between his teeth. Cyanide. He convulsed and died in his cell, cheating the gallows. This is the story of how the Nazi leadership met their end. It is a story of botched mechanics and prolonged agony. November 20th, 1945. 11 months. That was the time left before the ropes tightened. The clock started ticking in the Palace of Justice, a massive complex of stone and iron in Nuremberg, Germany. The Allies did not choose this location by accident. It was a calculated psychological strike. Years earlier, this city was the heartbeat of the Third Reich. Hitler held his loudest rallies here. Searchlights pierced the sky. Hundreds of thousands chanted his name. The laws stripping Jews of their humanity were written on these very streets. Now, the script flipped. The birthplace of the regime became its graveyard. 24 names appeared on the indictment, but when the proceedings opened, the dock was not full. Only 21 men faced the tribunal. Robert Ley, the head of the Labor Front, never made it to the stand. He strangled himself in his cell using a wet towel days before the opening statement. Gustav Krupp, the steel magnate, was bedridden and senile. Martin Bormann, the Führer's shadow, was nowhere to be found. He was tried as a ghost in absentia. The remaining 21 represented the skeleton of the Nazi state. At first glance, a group of tired men in ill-fitting suits, but in reality, the architects of hell. Look at the first row. Hermann Göring sat at the far left, prisoner number 1. He wore a faded light gray uniform, stripped of medals and epaulets. He was Hitler's designated successor. Next to him, Rudolf Hess, the erratic deputy who flew a fighter plane to Scotland in 1941, claiming he wanted peace. Then came Joachim von Ribbentrop, the diplomat who sold lies to the world. Beside him sat Wilhelm Keitel, the field marshal who turned the Wehrmacht into a machine of murder. The second row held the butchers who worked in the dark. Ernst Kaltenbrunner stared straight ahead. As the successor to Reinhard Heydrich, he controlled the security apparatus. The camps were his domain. Near him sat Alfred Rosenberg, the man who wrote the twisted philosophy of the master race. Then Hans Frank. They called him the Butcher of Poland. He didn't just govern, he liquidated millions to make room for Germans. There was Wilhelm Frick, the bureaucrat who drafted the race laws. There was Julius Streicher, the publisher of Der Stürmer, a newspaper so vile even some Nazis avoided it. Why were these specific charges necessary? The old laws of war covered soldiers, not mass murderers in suits. The prosecutors had to invent new legal concepts to match the scale of the crime. They listed 4 counts: crimes against peace, war crimes, conspiracy, and a new, terrifying term, crimes against humanity. This meant extermination, enslavement, and persecution on a continental scale. The trial ground on for 10 months. It wasn't just speeches. The prosecution brought a new weapon into the courtroom: cinema. The lights dimmed, a projector whirred to life. On the screen, the court saw footage shot by Allied soldiers during the liberation of the camps. The footage shows bulldozers pushing skeletal bodies into mass graves. It shows gas chambers and piles of human hair. The silence in the room was absolute. Göring looked away. Ribbentrop covered his face, but the evidence continued. Survivors took the stand. They spoke of the ghettos and the trains. Then came the paper trail. The Germans were efficient bureaucrats. They signed everything. The court examined the Einsatzgruppen reports. These documents coldly tallied the shooting of over 1 million Jews in the Soviet Union. They read the minutes of the Wannsee Conference. The blueprint for the final solution was right there in black and white. The defense scrambled. Some claimed ignorance. "I didn't know about the camps," they said. Others hid behind their rank. "I was following orders." Most pointed a finger at the dead man in Berlin. Hitler had committed suicide 6 months earlier. It was easy to blame the corpse in the bunker, but the documents destroyed their alibis. These men didn't just follow orders, they wrote them. Events accelerated. The judges retired to deliberate. October 1st, 1946. After 216 grueling sessions, the tribunal returned. The world held its breath. 19 defendants were found guilty. 3 were acquitted and released. But for the ringleaders, there was no mercy. 12 men received the death sentence. The list included the highest profiles: Hermann Göring, Joachim von Ribbentrop, Wilhelm Keitel, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, Alfred Rosenberg, Hans Frank, Wilhelm Frick, Alfred Jodl. The gavel came down. The era of the Third Reich was officially over. 11 death sentences. That was the final count echoing through the courtroom. Fritz Sauckel, the man who organized slave labor across Europe, Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the ruthless Reich commissioner of the Netherlands, Julius Streicher, the propagandist. When the translators spoke the verdict into the headsets, the masks finally slipped. Reactions varied wildly. Hermann Göring smirked. He adjusted his headphones and shrugged. He had expected nothing less. Joachim von Ribbentrop turned the color of ash. His hands trembled on the wooden rail. Field Marshal Keitel, the old soldier, snapped to attention. He stood rigid and accepted his fate without a word. Streicher laughed. It was a loud, manic sound in the silent hall. The guards marched the condemned men back to the concrete cell block. The heavy steel doors slammed shut. Under Allied law, the clock was ticking. 7 to 15 days. That was the mandatory window between final judgment and the rope. The execution date was set. October 16th, 1946. 1 minute past midnight. For 2 weeks, the prisoners listened to the passing of time. They knew the exact hour of their death. Some scribbled desperate final letters to family. Others knelt on the cold floor, praying with prison chaplains. Some maintained a facade of defiance, and Hermann Göring began his final operation. Why did he seem so calm? It looked like acceptance, but in reality, it was calculation. Göring refused to give the Allies the satisfaction of a public hanging. Throughout the trial, the footage shows he dominates the dock. He leans forward, aggressive and charismatic. He cross-examined witnesses with sharp precision. He defended Nazi ideology to the last breath. He rallied the broken men around him. Even in chains, he played the role of Reichsmarschall. He had no intention of walking up the 13 steps, but first, he tried the legal route. He flooded the tribunal with petitions. He requested that his sentence be changed from hanging to a firing squad. He argued that he was a military officer. A soldier deserves a bullet. The hangman's noose is reserved for common criminals and thieves. At first glance, a plea for dignity, but in reality, a final act of vanity. The tribunal did not blink. The requests were stamped denied. The charter was specific. All death sentences would be carried out by hanging. There were no exceptions. So Göring activated his backup plan. For months, possibly since the moment of his arrest, Göring had possessed a glass capsule of potassium cyanide. The mystery remains. How did he keep it? He was searched repeatedly. Guards watched him 24 hours a day through a sliding panel in the cell door. The lights were never turned off. Yet, the poison remained undetected. The most likely theory is simple. An American guard, charmed by the celebrity prisoner, accepted a bribe and handed it over. But Göring never revealed the source. October 15th. The sun set. The execution team tested the ropes in the gymnasium. Just hours before the scheduled hanging, the guards conducted their rounds. At 9:30 in the evening, a group of journalists walked the corridor. They peered into the cells. Göring lay on his cot. The rules were strict. The prisoner's hands must be visible outside the blankets at all times. Göring complied. He appeared to be sleeping. His chest rose and fell rhythmically, but this was only a performance. 10:45. The sentry looked through the peephole. Göring was still. 5 minutes passed, 10:50. The guard checked again. This time, the prisoner was not sleeping. He was twitching. A strange, wet choking sound echoed from the cell. The guard shouted for the corporal. Keys rattled in the lock. They rushed into the small room. Göring lay in the center of the cot. His face was contorted in agony. His body convulsed violently. The sharp smell of bitter almonds filled the air. He had cheated the hangman. 2 hours. That was exactly how much time remained before the execution. But in the cell, Hermann Göring's body was already in spasms. The doctor rushed into the room within minutes. He checked the pulse. He pried open the jaw. But there was nothing to be done. The prisoner was dying. He had bitten down on a hidden cyanide capsule. The glass crunched between his teeth. The poison worked instantly. Within moments, the breathing stopped. Hermann Göring was dead. The guards searched the floor. Near the body, they found a small brass cartridge case. Inside lay the shards of the broken vial. How did he hide the capsule for so long? It seemed impossible under 24-hour surveillance, but Göring claimed in a note that he had possessed the poison since his arrest. He left several letters behind. One was addressed to the prison commandant. It explained his refusal to submit to the rope. Another was addressed to his wife. The contents of these notes were never fully released to the public. But the message was clear. Göring's suicide enraged the American authorities. They were furious. They had wanted him to hang. They had wanted the world to see the mighty Reichsmarshal broken, humiliated, and swinging from the gallows. Instead, Göring had won one final victory. He had cheated the hangman. He had died on his own terms. And in doing so, he forced a sudden change to the schedule. One gallows now stood empty. 10 men would hang instead of 11, 1 a.m., October 16th. The operation began. Guards moved the condemned men from their cells toward the gymnasium. The camera records the setting, a converted basketball court with cracked plaster walls. The space measured approximately 33 feet wide by 80 feet long. 3 black-painted wooden gallows dominated the room. 2 were active. They would be used alternately to speed up the process. The third was a spare. It stood ready in case of mechanical failure. At first glance, a simple sports facility. But in reality, a mechanized factory for death. Each gallows was a massive structure. The platform stood 8 feet high and 8 feet square. To reach the top, the prisoners had to climb 13 wooden steps. From the heavy crossbeam hung a rope. The noose was tied with exactly 13 coils. The standard military protocol was strict. A trap door waited beneath the condemned person's feet. When the executioner pulled the lever, the trap door would open. The floor would vanish. The person would drop. If the distance was calculated correctly, physics took over. The sudden stop would break the neck at the second or third cervical vertebra. It caused instant death. This was the long drop method, perfected by British executioners. But the American military chose a different path. They used the standard drop. The fall was shorter, only 4 to 6 feet instead of the British 8 to 10. This difference changed everything. It meant the neck often did not break. Death came from strangulation. It took longer. The prisoner would struggle and suffocate. It was more painful, but American standards considered it acceptable. Who was in charge of this machinery? Master Sergeant John C. Woods, a 35-year-old enlisted man from Kansas. Woods claimed to be an expert. He told Army officials he had assisted in multiple civilian hangings in Texas and Oklahoma. He spoke with confidence, but there was no mistake. It was a lie. Woods had lied to get the job. He had no documented experience as a hangman. He had learned about the mechanics of hanging solely from watching cowboy movies as a child. The Army never verified his claims. They simply needed someone to execute 10 Nazi war criminals. Woods volunteered. They gave him the badge. He was not alone on the platform. Joseph Malta, a 28-year-old military policeman, assisted him. The preparations were complete. The first prisoner began the climb up the 13 steps. 1:11 in the morning. At that precise minute, the operation began. 2 executioners stood ready to process 10 condemned men in less than 2 hours. The schedule allowed no delays. The first name echoed in the corridor: Joachim von Ribbentrop. Guards entered his cell and removed the steel handcuffs. They replaced them immediately with leather straps, binding his hands tightly behind his back. Ribbentrop was marched out of the cell block, across a dark courtyard, and into the gymnasium. The atmosphere changed instantly. Inside the execution chamber, 2 Army sergeants flanked the prisoner, gripping his arms with crushing force. Ribbentrop tried to maintain the appearance of a diplomat. He looked composed, but then his eyes adjusted to the light. In the frame, 3 black gallows looming over the gymnasium floor. Ribbentrop's face went white. The mask of stoicism crumbled. An officer stood at the base of the structure and demanded his name. Ribbentrop stared in silence. The officer repeated the order. Why did he hesitate? Panic had seized his throat. Suddenly, he almost shouted, "Joachim von Ribbentrop!" His voice cracked, high and brittle with terror. He approached the stairs. 13 steps led to the platform. He climbed them without stopping. But the witnesses saw the truth. His legs shook violently with every step. On the trapdoor, he was positioned directly beneath the coarse hemp noose. The executioner secured the knot around his neck. The officer asked for final words. Ribbentrop spoke fast, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "God protect Germany. God have mercy on my soul. My last wish is that German unity be maintained, that understanding between East and West be realized, and there be peace for the world." It was a plea, not a speech. The executioner wasted no time. A black hood was pulled roughly over Ribbentrop's head. The lever was pulled. The trapdoor crashed open. The body dropped. But silence did not follow. A black canvas curtain concealed the space beneath the platform. From behind it, disturbing sounds drifted out to the witnesses. Groaning, the wet gasp of a man fighting for air, the rhythmic creaking of the rope as the body swung and twisted. At first glance, a standard hanging, but in reality, a botched execution. The drop had failed to break his neck. Ribbentrop did not die quickly. He strangled. Minutes dragged on. The sounds continued. The witnesses stood frozen, listening to the slow asphyxiation. Finally, the noise ceased. A prison doctor, a captain in the United States Army, stepped behind the curtain to check for a pulse. 1:29 in the morning. It had been 18 minutes since Ribbentrop entered the chamber. 18 minutes, a properly executed hanging kills in less than 5. But there was no time to analyze the error. 9 more men were waiting in their cells. 1:44 in the morning. The door opened again. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel entered the gymnasium. He was 64 years old. He was the highest-ranking military officer facing death that night. The context was heavy. Keitel was not just a soldier, he was the architect of annihilation. He had signed the commando order, authorizing the summary execution of captured Allied troops. He had signed the Commissar order, sealing the fate of Soviet political officers. Under conditions he personally approved, over 2 million Soviet prisoners of war had died in German custody. But Keitel did not tremble. He walked to his death with the discipline of the parade ground. He marched steadily between his guards. His shoulders were pinned back. His posture remained rigid and erect. When the officer asked his name, Keitel barked it out, clear, firm, unbroken. He mounted the 13 steps without a hint of hesitation. On the platform, standing beneath the rope that had just killed Ribbentrop, he delivered his final statement. "I call on the Almighty God to be considerate of the German people. Show them mercy. Over 2 million German soldiers went to their death for the fatherland before me." He paused. "I now follow my sons. All for Germany." The room fell silent. The reference hit hard. Both of Keitel's sons had been killed in action during the war. Now, their father prepared to join them. The executioner stepped forward again. The black hood was placed over his head. The world disappeared. 24 minutes. That was the specific duration of the agony. The executioner placed the black hood over Wilhelm Keitel's head. The noose was tightened. The lever clanked. The trapdoor swung open. Keitel dropped through the floor, but silence did not follow. From behind the dark curtain, the sounds of a struggle erupted. It was not a clean break. The rope creaked loudly under the weight of the field marshal. He was fighting for oxygen that simply would not come. Why did it take so long? The drop distance was miscalculated. Instead of a snapped neck, the result was slow strangulation. Witnesses checked their watches. Minutes ticked by. Ribbentrop had died slowly, but Keitel took much longer. The doctor waited. The American guard stood rigid. Through the heavy fabric of the curtain, a muffled voice was audible. Keitel was not just groaning, he was praying. He cried out to God while hanging in the pit. But the night was far from over. It took 28 minutes for the heart to finally stop beating. The doctor confirmed the death. The body was cut down. 2 o'clock in the morning. Steps echoed on the wooden stairs. Ernst Kaltenbrunner climbed toward the gallows. At 6 feet 7 inches, he towered over the guards and the chaplain. A giant with deep dueling scars across his face. He looked like a monster. At first glance, a defeated prisoner, but in reality, the architect of terror. As head of the Reich Security Main Office, he controlled the Gestapo. He managed the concentration camps. He signed the death warrants for millions. Throughout the trial, he played the fool. He claimed he knew nothing of the Holocaust. The evidence proved otherwise. Now, standing on the trapdoor, he had one last chance to speak. The room went quiet. Kaltenbrunner did not repent. He declared, "I have loved my German people and my fatherland with a warm heart. I have done my duty by the laws of my people." He shifted the blame to others. He claimed crimes were committed without his knowledge. His final words were simple. "Germany, good luck." It was a pathetic lie. Everyone in the gymnasium knew the truth. The executioner wasted no time. The black hood descended over the scarred face. The noose was adjusted. The lever was pulled. Gravity took over. Because of his massive height, the rope was longer. The drop was deeper. This time, the physics worked better. He did not struggle as long as Keitel. The doctor stepped forward with a stethoscope. 12 minutes later, at 2:12 in the morning, the pulse faded. The giant was dead. 2:17 in the morning. At that precise minute, Alfred Rosenberg began his final walk to the gallows. He was the architect of hate. As the Nazi Party's chief racial theorist, he provided the ideological ink that justified the blood. His book, The Myth of the 20th Century, sat on shelves right next to Mein Kampf. It was mandatory reading for a nation preparing for slaughter. Rosenberg had served as the Reich minister for the occupied Eastern Territories. Under his watch, millions of Slavs and Jews were enslaved and murdered. But in the gymnasium, the theorist had no words left. Why did the man of a million words say nothing? Perhaps he accepted his end, or perhaps his arrogance remained intact. At first glance, a broken man, but in reality, a silent fanatic. Of all the condemned that night, only Rosenberg refused to speak. He stood rigid on the trapdoor. The hangman adjusted the knot. The hood covered his face. There was no final plea to the witnesses or to God. The lever was pulled. Rosenberg dropped. The rope snapped tight. 14 minutes later, at 2:31, the doctor checked for a pulse. There was none. But the night was far from over. At 2:38, Hans Frank entered the room. He was once the Governor-General of occupied Poland. He called himself the King of Poland. He had lived like a medieval tyrant inside Wawel Castle in Krakow, surrounded by looted art and luxury. But outside his castle walls, he orchestrated hell. Under his administration, the Warsaw Ghetto was built, sealed, and eventually liquidated. 3 million Polish Jews died because of his orders. Hundreds of thousands of ethnic Poles perished alongside them. Yet, prison changed him. He claimed to find God behind bars. He converted to Catholicism. He clutched a rosary. During the trial, he offered up his detailed diaries and testified against his former colleagues. He seemed eager to confess. Now, facing the rope, he looked almost calm. The witnesses noted his demeanor. He did not tremble. His final words were soft but audible. "I am thankful for the kind treatment during my captivity, and I ask God to accept me with mercy." It sounded like relief. The trapdoor opened beneath him. The drop was sharp. At 2:45, the doctors pronounced him dead. 7 minutes from entrance to exit. It was one of the quicker deaths of the night. The line continued. At 2:53, the door opened again. Wilhelm Frick walked in. At 69 years old, he was the oldest man to face the hangman that night. He was not a soldier. He was a bureaucrat. As the Reich Minister of the Interior from 1933 to 1943, Frick used paper as a weapon. He drafted the Nuremberg laws. With a pen stroke, he stripped Jews of their citizenship. He laid the legal foundation for the Holocaust. He signed the decrees for the euthanasia program that murdered over 70,000 disabled Germans. He managed the annexation of Austria, but the power of the office was gone. In the gymnasium, he looked frail. The lights glared off his balding head. Frick seemed the least steady of the group. He approached the gallows stairs. His foot caught on the 13th step. He stumbled.